My 20th summer, just before my final year of college, I secured an internship at a downtown financial firm. It was hardly glamorous, mostly data entry, spreadsheets, and endless hours glued to a screen. Still, the pay was fair, and it promised a boost to my resume. 7 other interns shared the open office space with me, crammed into rows of cubicles. These dividers offered just enough separation to make casual chatter optional, but never true solitude. 5 of the 7 were genuinely likable, laid-back students who saw the internship for what it was, not a life-altering event. Then there was Eric, who approached every task with an almost grim intensity, rarely speaking, his fingers a blur across the keyboard, as if racing against an invisible clock. But the 7th intern, Alex, was a different story altogether. At first glance, he seemed ordinary, perhaps a touch awkward, a feeling most of us shared starting out. He was notably tall, slender, with an almost unnaturally pale complexion and a perpetually disheveled mass of dark hair. He simply didn't fit the typical mold of a finance intern. Yet it wasn't his appearance that truly unsettled me. It was his peculiar behavior directed solely at me. Initially, it began subtly. He'd materialize at my cubicle, leaning over the low divider. His height made him seem impossibly tall, his head appearing suddenly above the partition, as if disconnected from his body. He'd tilt his head, a peculiar, fixed grin stretching across his face, and begin speaking in a deliberately strange voice, as if aiming to sound unsettling. I'd offer an awkward chuckle, feigning amusement, but a shiver of unease always ran through me. It felt profoundly out of place in a professional environment. He'd utter odd phrases like, "Working hard or hardly working, Ronnie," in that slow, unnatural cadence, holding his unsettling smile for an uncomfortable length of time. For the first few encounters, I dismissed it as an attempt at quirkiness or an awkward effort to stand out. Internships often brought out strange social dynamics, so I tried not to overthink it. Then, the incidents grew more frequent. Every single day, at least once, I'd catch sight of his head slowly ascending above my cubicle wall. That same unnerving, stretched grin would be fixed on his face, followed by some bizarre, nonsensical conversation. He'd sometimes attempt jokes that fell flat, or murmur disconnected phrases. Each time, his voice maintained that same unsettling tone. Soft, almost a whisper, laced with a taunting edge that made my skin crawl. The other interns certainly noticed, but they mostly brushed it off with a laugh, assuming Alex was just trying to inject some odd humor into the dreary office. I suspected they even believed Alex and I shared some unspoken understanding, a rapport he hadn't forged with anyone else. But the truth was, his singular focus on me, despite my treating him no differently than anyone else, made me profoundly uneasy. It felt as though I had been singled out as the unwilling audience for his strange, unsettling performance. As the weeks bled into one another, his visits grew longer. He would lean over, remaining there for minutes, his gaze fixed on me as he spoke, or sometimes just stared silently. I'd force a laugh, invent a pressing report, hoping he'd take the hint and retreat. He rarely did. Then, roughly 6 weeks into the internship, I was eating dinner at home when my phone chimed. The number was unfamiliar. I usually ignored unknown callers, but anticipating a delivery confirmation, I answered. After I said hello, a few seconds of unnerving silence stretched. Then abruptly a voice spoke, one I instantly recognized. It was Alex's. That same unsettling, deliberately artificial tone he used in the office. He declared, "The tide's coming in. Pull your boat out of the water and out of the water." Then he erupted into a chilling, utterly deranged laugh before the line went dead. The true horror wasn't just the call itself. It was the chilling realization that I had never given Alex my number. My first instinct was to text the number back, asking if it was him, but the message failed to deliver. A quick search revealed it was a landline. That's when a profound dread began to settle in. How had he found me? Why the cryptic message, the unsettling shout? I desperately tried to find a logical explanation, perhaps a company directory, but the memory of his unnatural laugh, raw and unhinged, echoed in my mind. It wasn't playful. It was a sound crafted to terrorize, stripping away any pretense of quirky behavior. When Monday arrived, Alex was nowhere to be seen. His cubicle sat empty, a silent space throughout the morning. I approached Martin, our supervisor, and cautiously inquired if company records might have been accessed. Martin looked genuinely puzzled, explaining that interns had no such access to personal details. Then came the revelation. Alex had been let go the previous week due to poor performance and a disregard for warnings. It was then I recounted the phone call. Martin seemed taken aback, and a few other interns, overhearing, chimed in. They nodded in agreement, confessing their own discomfort, how Alex had always struck them as unsettling. I detailed the strange cubicle visits, his peculiar voice, everything. Martin assured me there was nothing to fear, that Alex was gone for good and had no reason to return. A fragile sense of relief settled over me. For the next week or so, I found myself constantly on edge, anticipating another message, a chance encounter, anything. But nothing came. Life at the office slowly returned to its mundane rhythm, and I began to believe the ordeal was truly over. That illusion shattered one early Friday morning, around 5 a.m. The world outside my window was still cloaked in darkness, save for a thin gray sliver of light pushing through the blinds. A subtle sound stirred me from sleep, a faint disturbance from outside. Compelled by an inexplicable urge, I rose and peered through the window. I instantly regretted it. Standing in my backyard, positioned eerily between the deep shadows of the trees and the faint glow of the porch light, was a figure. He was gazing directly up at my window. Even in the dim pre-dawn light, recognition struck me like a cold shock. The lean silhouette, the disheveled dark hair, the unnaturally rigid posture, it was Alex. For a few agonizing seconds, I was frozen, my mind struggling to comprehend the impossible scene unfolding before me. Then, piercing the stillness of the morning, I heard it, my name, called out in that same haunting, drawn-out, sing-song voice he'd used at work. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. It was a sound devoid of joy, a terrifying, unhinged peal that spoke of a mind utterly adrift from reality. A surge of defiant terror propelled me to action. I flung open the window and shouted, my voice cracking, warning him I was calling the authorities and demanding he leave my property. I brandished my phone, a desperate signal of my intent. He remained motionless for another beat, then slowly turned. Still laughing, a soft fading echo. He walked deliberately, disappearing into the dense line of trees behind my house. I immediately contacted the authorities. The dispatcher, calm and practical, simply asked if he was still present. When I confirmed he was gone, she advised me to call back if he returned or made any overt threats. I never saw him again after that morning. He vanished from my life completely. Not at work, not in town, nowhere. The authorities, unable to act without direct evidence of a crime, left me to grapple with the lingering unease, hoping, desperately, that it was truly over. The remainder of the summer passed without further incident. My internship concluded, and on my final day, my boss offered me a permanent position for after graduation. I accepted, though small, persistent tremor of apprehension remained about ever returning to that office. I kept the morning's terrifying encounter to myself, seeing no purpose in sharing a story that, to others, might sound like a bizarre delusion. I eventually tried to make sense of his actions, convincing myself he must have been struggling with some profound mental distress or social challenge. It was the only way I could reconcile the quiet, awkward intern with the terrifying figure in my backyard, consumed by that wild, unhinged laughter at dawn. Years have passed since then, and I've moved on, pursuing a different career path after college. The incident rarely crosses my mind, but sometimes the chilling image of him standing there, bathed in the faint morning light, still sends a shiver down my spine. I still wonder how he got my number, how he found my address, and what he truly wanted that morning. It's unsettling to think how easily personal information can be uncovered these days. All I know is that for a few months, I worked alongside someone who wasn't just strange. He harbored something far deeper and more disturbing. And no matter how many years fade, I'll never forget the sound of his laughter echoing in the dark, as if it was all some monstrous joke only he understood. This happened when I was 17. It was my very first proper job, bagging groceries at the local store in our quiet Vermont town, the kind of place where every face was familiar, and nothing out of the ordinary ever disturbed the peace. Initially, I enjoyed the work. It was straightforward, and most of my coworkers were genuinely friendly. I quickly settled into a comfortable routine with the other cashiers and stockers, especially during the quiet hours when customers were few. That's when we'd gather near the front, chatting about anything and everything. TV shows, playfully mocking the older, quirkier staff, or grumbling about difficult shoppers. Those moments were a welcome escape from staring at a screen or a blank wall all day. Depending on the shift supervisor, the atmosphere could either be relaxed, with people on their phones and socializing freely, or more strictly managed. Among my colleagues, there was Shawn, 24, a little out of sync with social cues, his hair perpetually caught in that awkward in-between stage, not quite reaching his shoulders. He worked in the dairy section, so our paths rarely crossed. He was quiet, polite even, and I barely gave him a second thought. Most people just offered him a quick nod as they passed, and he returned the gesture. Eventually, I was added to a coworker group chat, and he was in it too. I didn't think twice about it. It was just a space for work updates and silly jokes, filled mostly with the younger employees. But then, Shawn started messaging me directly. At first, it seemed innocent. Questions about shifts, whether I was covering certain days. Yet, as the weeks passed, his intent became disturbingly clear. He started probing into my personal world, my favorite music, what I did after hours, even my weekend plans. I tried to dismiss it as harmless small talk, but something in his tone felt off. He'd sometimes call me cute, in a way that made my skin prickle, or drop casually flirtatious remarks. I was only 17, and the age gap felt significant. No one else seemed to notice his peculiar focus on me. His messages grew more frequent, often late into the night, commenting on my online posts. There was no explicit threat, but an insistent, unnerving persistence that left me deeply uneasy. I dreaded confronting him, fearing the awkwardness it would create at work. So I simply tried to ignore him, hoping he'd eventually back away. I was deep into the newest season, devouring episodes in my room, utterly lost in its world. Then just a couple of days later at work, the usual crowd was gathered near the front, sharing their thoughts on various TV series. I was chatting casually with some cashiers about a different show, when out of nowhere, Shawn interjected. "You're a fan of Stranger Things, aren't you?" A sudden chill gripped me. I hadn't breathed a word to anyone at work about my favorite series. I managed a small nod, attempting to dismiss it, but a knot of icy dread formed deep inside me. How could he possibly know? I remained silent, though our eyes met briefly. He offered a strange, hesitant smile before slowly retreating to the dairy section, as if his comment held no significance. But the unsettling truth settled over me. His gaze had been on me far more often than I'd ever imagined. The true terror, however, didn't begin until a few nights later. I was in bed, struggling to find sleep after an exhausting shift. The house was utterly silent when a faint, unsettling scraping sound brushed against my bedroom window. Initially, I dismissed it as the wind or a branch dancing against the pane. But then it came again, a clear, deliberate tap, soft, yet profoundly disturbing. I crept from my bed and cautiously peered through the blinds, half expecting to confront Shawn, but the night outside was empty. I tried desperately to rationalize the sound, to convince myself there was nothing to fear. Yet Shawn's question at work, about a show I'd never mentioned to a soul, echoed relentlessly in my mind. A couple of days later, another message from him appeared. This time, I refused to ignore it. I replied, clearly and with unwavering resolve, that I was not interested. That was the moment everything spiraled. Almost instantly, his chilling reply flashed across my screen. "Okay, good luck changing your address." I stared in disbelief. With a single deranged message, clearly sent in a fit of rage, without thought for consequence, he confirmed every terrifying suspicion I'd harbored. I immediately saved the exchange and captured screenshots. Without hesitation, I went straight to my manager and laid bare the entire ordeal. My manager listened, visibly shaken, and assured me they would take swift action. My father and I also went to the local authorities, presenting the messages and recounting the unsettling incident at my window, explaining my profound fear that Shawn was pursuing me relentlessly. The very next day, our boss summoned Shawn. He never returned. He was dismissed on the spot, and the authorities began the process for a formal order preventing him from coming near me. I desperately hoped this was the end, but a deep unease told me otherwise. Nothing truly felt resolved. Even with that legal protection in place, if he truly harbored such dark intentions, what power could a mere document hold against someone so unhinged? What would stop him from returning to my home intent on something terrible? I meticulously double-checked every lock, ignored all calls and messages from unfamiliar numbers, and guarded my daily routines, sharing them only with my family. Weeks crawled by, each one a torment. I would often jolt awake in the dead of night, certain I heard something outside. I had to constantly remind myself that the legal directive was binding, that he was forbidden from approaching me. But the terror was a living, breathing thing. Eventually, as weeks bled into months, the gnawing paranoia slowly began to recede. There were no further incidents, no attempts at contact, no sudden, terrifying appearances. A formal order seemed to hold, and my life gradually found its way back to a semblance of normalcy. I grew more comfortable venturing out alone, ceased my obsessive window checks before sleep, and eventually, Shawn faded from my thoughts entirely. Yet, it took an agonizingly long time to truly feel safe once more. Even with time, the experience etched itself onto me. I became acutely aware of my surroundings, wary of new acquaintances, particularly in vulnerable situations. I learned to trust my gut, to confront any unsettling behavior with gravity, no matter how insignificant it initially appeared. Looking back, the most chilling realization isn't the potential harm he might have inflicted. It's the terrifying swiftness with which someone seemingly ordinary, even awkward or benign, can transform into a profound wellspring of dread. Seemingly harmless exchanges, brief chats, texts, casual inquiries, or minor remarks can subtly morph into something truly menacing. Years have since passed, and I've left that chapter behind. My work is in another place. My home, a new space, and the old grocery store, along with its former colleagues, is a distant memory. Yet the chilling recollection of those nights, lying awake, certain of a lurking presence beyond my window, remains a shadow that never entirely fades. It serves as a stark warning of how swiftly security can crumble, even in the most tranquil, unassuming communities. Though Shawn never physically harmed me, the profound emotional toll he inflicted was enough to shatter my sense of fundamental safety. Therefore, if you ever sense a colleague overstepping boundaries, however slightly, do not dismiss it. What might initially seem like overreaction could spare you prolonged terror, or worse, because true menace often hides in plain sight. But I did eventually find my way forward. Now, years later, I can reflect and affirm that I endured, and that truly is enough. At the age of 26, I began a new job at a modest insurance agency, nestled in a peaceful corner of Pennsylvania. It was the sort of place hidden behind a busy strip mall, featuring a single extended line of desks, the constant hum of wavering fluorescent lights, and the perpetual scent of brewing coffee. While far from luxurious, it provided a steady income, and I generally enjoyed the company of my colleagues. The work itself could be tedious, particularly during quiet periods when calls were scarce, but it offered a straightforward way to earn a living. My usual routine involved day shifts, but this specific Friday I was assigned to stay late and assist with closing, as we had fallen behind on organizing a large collection of client documents. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. By 3 o'clock, the heavens opened, unleashing a deluge so dense it obscured the street's end. Moments later, thunder began to roll, vibrating the windows with startling regularity. To be honest, I found myself rather enjoying the intense atmosphere the storm created. Our manager, anticipating the storm's escalation, decided to dismiss most of the staff early. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. He was a tall man in his early 30s, reserved and possessed a subtle, unsettling quality I couldn't quite pinpoint. Not overtly menacing, but undeniably peculiar. He rarely spoke, yet his presence was a constant, almost shadow-like. If I ventured to the coffee machine, he'd appear moments later. If I was refilling the paper tray, he'd materialize feigning a similar task. I chalked it up to social awkwardness. By 5 o'clock, the tempest raged with full intensity. It felt as though every few breaths, a brilliant flash of lightning lit the sky, followed by a thunderous boom that vibrated through the very floor beneath me. The office felt unnervingly vast and deserted, the familiar drone of the lights swallowed by the relentless roar of the storm. Tom remained at his desk, several rows away, his fingers working at his computer, though from my vantage point, whatever he typed seemed utterly meaningless. Each time my gaze drifted, I caught him subtly looking my way. Initially, I forced myself to concentrate on my tasks. However, after an hour or more, a disturbing realization dawned. He hadn't moved from his seat. Close to 6:30, the lights began to falter. We both shared an involuntary, uneasy chuckle as the office plunged into dimness, but he offered no words. The subsequent flicker lingered, and when the electricity finally died, the office fell into an unnerving hush, broken only by the ceaseless drumming of the rain. Emergency lights then cast a weak, sickly orange pallor over everything. I suggested it might be wise to leave, but Tom remained silent. Then I heard the distinct jingle of keys, followed by the chilling click of the front door being secured. He mumbled that it wasn't safe to venture out in the storm. While a part of me tried to believe he was simply being considerate, the unsettling cadence of his voice sent a shiver down my spine. I retrieved my bag and jacket, planning to shelter briefly before venturing home. The power cut transformed the vast office into a suffocating box. Emergency lights cast only a sickly pallor, while the storm outside screamed its fury, drowning all other sound. Returning to the main area, I found Tom by the entrance, a silent sentinel gazing into the black abyss of the parking lot. The rain was a solid curtain, erasing the world beyond the glass. I announced my intention to call my boyfriend, to reassure him I'd be home shortly. Again, no reply. He remained fixed, a statue against the dim light, his gaze lost in the deluge. I retreated to the break room, only to find my phone completely without signal. The storm must have severed the connection. Desperate, I tried the landline, but it too was utterly lifeless. A cold dread began to grip me. Spinning to return to the main office, I gasped, nearly leaping from my skin. Tom stood framed in the doorway, a silent apparition. I hadn't heard a single step. He held a small light beneath his chin, twisting his features into grotesque shadows, a faint, unsettling smirk playing on his lips, as if he found my terror amusing. I managed a shaky laugh, admitting he'd startled me. I pressed him again about unlocking the entrance, but he reiterated his strange warning. Too dangerous. Better to await the storm's abatement. I feigned agreement, but a frantic pulse throbbed in my veins. His eyes, though, never left me. Determined to appear composed, I moved to my cubicle, gathering my belongings, plotting my escape for the first lull in the tempest. A few minutes later, when I dared to glance up, Tom had vanished. Perhaps he'd gone to the facilities. Seizing the fleeting opportunity, I decided to try the back door instead, remembering it led directly to the smaller lot where my car awaited. But as my hand met the cold metal, the handle refused to budge. A heavy chain, secured with a padlock from the inside, had been wrapped around it. This was utterly unprecedented. A chilling certainty settled over me. I was trapped. Spinning around, I saw a faint wavering light pierce the gloom of the hallway. I dove into the supply closet beside the break room, pulling the door shut with agonizing care. My breath hitched in my chest, threatening to betray me. I could hear Tom's deliberate, slow footsteps echoing closer. Then he spoke my name, his voice a soft, unsettling murmur, feigning concern. He simply wanted to ensure my safety, he claimed. I remained utterly motionless, silent as the grave, My heart hammered against my ribs. A furious drumbeat I was sure he must detect. He passed by, and for a terrifying eternity, a sliver of the flashlight's eerie glow seeped beneath the gore, only to vanish into the deeper darkness. A deafening crack of thunder rattled the very foundations of the building. The rain intensified, and I realized a section of the roof above the break room was now weeping water. I forced myself to wait, perhaps 10 agonizing minutes, before finally mustering the courage to crack open the door. The hallway was deserted. The unsettling beam of light had vanished. I crept out, inching my way back towards the front. Rounding the final corner, I froze mid-step. The front glass door was utterly obliterated, a jagged maw gaping into the storm. Rain lashed inwards, drenching the carpet. Tom was nowhere to be seen. A flicker of doubt. Had he gone out? But then a fierce clarity. This was my only opportunity. I burst through the ruined entrance, tearing into the merciless downpour, sprinting for my car. The drenching cold was nothing compared to the ice in my veins. My hands trembled so violently, I struggled to force the key into the ignition. Then I was out, roaring from the lot, never once daring a glance in the rear view. Reaching home, I frantically secured every lock, then collapsed in my living room, trembling, watching the relentless rain against the glass. Sleep was an impossible dream that night. The following morning, I recounted the nightmare to my manager. He listened with skepticism until he arrived at the office himself, confronted by the shattered door. He summoned the authorities, who took my statement at the scene. They spoke of an investigation, but the prevailing sentiment was that Tom had simply vanished. His car remained in the lot, unlocked, keys resting on the seat, his phone, wallet, and meager belongings left behind. A final, chilling enigma. The chilling revelation struck me. The security cameras hadn't succumbed to the storm's fury, but had been deliberately silenced long before the power failed. A cold dread tightened its grip, the calculated nature of his actions far more terrifying than any random act. He simply vanished, swallowed by the relentless night, never to be seen again. My coworkers whispered theories of a sudden, shattering mental collapse, but a far more sinister thought clung to me, a persistent whisper of what if his intentions had been darker, more deliberate than mere madness. Within a month, I could no longer endure the weight of that place. I resigned. Though no further incidents ever occurred, the memory of that night, trapped and terrified within those walls, was a suffocating presence. The thought of returning to this enclosed space where such a chilling ordeal had unfolded felt profoundly unhealthy, a constant echo of dread.